Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's always an honor and a pleasure to introduce our next guest on this podcast. This man is a native of Steilacoom, Washington. Go Dogs. This man went to the U.S. Navy Academy, or the U.S. Naval Academy, played football, wrestled, and after he was done with the Naval Academy, he went to basic underwater demolition SEAL training. I graduated as an officer, leading the class of 217. Once he was finished with that, he reported to SEAL Team 8, and that was in Little Creek, Virginia, and worked his way up to the rank of lieutenant. After his career in the SEAL team was finished, he pursued a career in college football and education. He got his MBA from the University of Michigan and coached multiple colleges in football and in several different roles. He's also mentored people, student athletes, on and off campus, on and off the field. Personally, I think he has one of the best job titles in college football. That was at the University of Illinois, where he was director of man development. If I had to read his resume, if I had to read his full resume, this would be 5 hours long. But I'll add three quick little tidbits. Jake's favorite three-letter word is PDF. His favorite food is pasta. And his favorite pet is a mountain lion. Okay, well, welcome to the show, Jake. And Jake Zweig.
Thank you, Adrian. I got to get up on my sign language, brother. So I hit you with that one, right? Like, super simple.
Thank you. That's great. Awesome. So I wanted to dive in because your and my roles are very similar in college athletics. Obviously, you were more in a coaching role, and I was more of a student. I guess more so on the academic side of student athlete things. So I wanted to see what your approach was and how you approach your work with students between the ages of 18 to 22, those student athletes, how you develop them, because that is sort of my niche and my interest as well. So I guess my first question is a little bit of your background, and I wanted to see what your take on it was. So for me, I have struggled a little bit when I've worked with college athletes. I don't really know what their backgrounds are, where they're coming from, what kind of upbringing they had, what their mindsets are, and what their attitudes are. So for example, when I was in high school, I had 3 different baseball coaches. The head coach, his primary job was essentially, he was a corrections officer. The second guy was in the Army, and the third guy was a police officer. So they were pretty rough on me, but I think it worked out just fine. By the time I got to college, I felt like I was very well prepared for pretty much anything. So some of the other athletes that I've worked with that come in are spoon-fed, or they're coddled, or whatever the case is. And sometimes I can't really predict how they're going to take that. So I guess more so my question is, how do you approach that? How do you test the athletes when they come in?
So we really don't test the athletes. In major college football, we know every one of the kids we're bringing in for the last 2.5 years, roughly. So there's not a lot of surprises walking in the door for us in college athletics. I'd like it to be said that I'm not at the University of Illinois anymore, but it's still leadership. At the end of the day, it's my job as a leader to look into people's souls and understand what type of person I have, what makes them tick, and who they're going to become or who they want to become. This generation poses a bunch of hurdles to get over, incredibly entitled, not necessarily based in reality. Instagram and Twitter and YouTube have allowed them to live vicariously through other people. And that causes them to believe that they can live that same life. Here, when I was at Illinois, all the athletes told me that they were going to go to the NFL. We had a pretty good run this year. I think we put 5 guys in the NFL this year. Over the last 4 years I've been here, we've only put 3 in. So an exceptional year for Illinois. I just think it's hard, right? They don't want to really do the work either. So I'm dealing with somebody in my family right now, and I put them in a rock and a hard place, and I don't know if they're just going to sit there and let the rock sit on them or not. So we'll see.
Yeah. So for me, I'm just trying to figure out, I guess I'm trying to figure out what the right words are. So for me, there's another thing with the 18-year-olds, obviously with social media, there's a lot more voice, there's a lot more opinions involved in an athlete's life. For example, I came into college and Facebook was really kind of just starting off. There wasn't really any social media. Instagram wasn't a thing when I was in college. So for me, I was like, all right, whatever, we'll go with it. Now I'm curious. I did watch some of your videos just to prepare for this. And I saw one of the stories where you had spoken about, I believe it was right before you started, but you ran into Master Chief, and they said that there were like $4,000 rides on you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that story and how you suggest athletes manage their expectations?
So that was for me, that was a SEAL training. I had a $4,000 bounty on my head as African-American officer going through training. There had been 13 before me. The last one graduated in 1989. I was there in 1998 and became I guess it would have been the 14th to graduate, but I became the 14th person that tried that ended up graduating. I became the fifth Black SEAL officer in 1998. So, I mean, easy deal. It's always good to know people are betting against you. I love when the decks are stacked against me. The more they put on, the more I give them. So it really wasn't that big a deal to me. I kind of knew it was going to be bad. I went out of shape to make it worse. And, you can't focus on that stuff. You just got to keep it moving and do what you got to do. Attack it one bite at a time, one day at a time. I had a lot of fun in SEAL training. It sucked, but it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. So for me, I was watching some of your stories, and I was comparing that with Travis Lively, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but obviously you see some of the stories about how some of the people in the training classes and how they didn't get along with each other. They didn't necessarily agree with some of the perspectives there. And you as a leader, I'm curious, obviously there are a lot of people from a lot of different cultures and backgrounds, different personalities. So I'm curious as to how you would encourage those 18-year-olds, 19, 20-year-old students to manage that and managing the team dynamics.
You talking about in SEAL training or on a team?
I guess both. That would apply to both. Or was there any carryover?
So SEAL training is savage living. I let one of my E3s beat the crap out of one of my O1s because my O1 was getting pretentious with it. Everybody got the same foot in the game. So if you're going to sit there and act pretentious, you better be ready for the consequences, at least in our class, right? Like our class was pretty primordial as it was a run. It was me, 3 other football players from the Naval Academy, a bunch of solid dudes from ROTC and OCS. And I was in charge pretty much the whole time, short the first 2 weeks. And I have a different form of leadership, man. We kick butt, man. And that's just how it goes. I don't think leading 18 and 24-year-olds is much different than it ever has been. The thing I will tell you is I don't give them any wiggle room. And then the other thing is they don't receive information like everybody else does. If you're not using their phone to capitalize on teaching them, then you're not getting anything through their heads. So I really don't lecture them. I don't talk to them a whole lot. I spend most of my time, using GroupMe and a couple other apps that we use to get whatever I want them to learn across to them, because meeting with them is pointless at this point. They have a 0.5 second time attention span at this point. So like you sitting down and talking to them for more than 10 minutes is a waste of time. And if you're trying to teach them something, anything over about 30 seconds, then they're not going to get it.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think that sort of shifts over into a bit of a different tangent. I think for me, that's super interesting. I use social media, I use GroupMe, and all those different apps to communicate with our teammates. And obviously, I mean, when I was a senior in college, I was the first and only deaf captain of our baseball team. So there were a lot of challenges there because we don't speak the same language. They don't know what my background was. They don't know how I communicate and all of that. So now I'm in charge of leading that group of 35 guys on a baseball team. So now I'm interested because you had spoken a little bit about attention spans, and I was thinking about it a little bit more. I think it's something where you have to be much more direct and to the point. So now,
absolutely. And this is
go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is an interesting point. Like I use the F word pretty considerably. All right. And people are always like, wow, why? I said, because they, like there's been a lot of research that's done, like the F word causes them to listen because they're lived in such a politically correct environment this whole time growing up that when they hear it, their ears perk up and they listen. It's just who I am, but I deliver a hard message because what I found is the amount of BS artists has increased exponentially with social media. And so to weed out all the BS people, you give it to them on fire and the fire guys eat it. Everybody else steps away from the fire and tries to distance themselves because they don't want to play with that heat.
Yeah, speaking of leadership and that no BS stuff, I've seen and heard a lot of stories about SEAL training, obviously, that they essentially they eat their own. And that's more so a concept where the instructor is trying to force his students to quit and all of that, and really trying to, I guess, weed out the quote unquote the weak. So you could do that in SEAL training, obviously, but I feel like you can't always do that in college athletics. So if you're not good, you sit on the bench, but they're still part of it. They're still part of the team. And you still have that aspect of where the weakest person can still have an influence on the team. So how do you manage that?
I get rid of them. Plain and simple. I don't care. If I got somebody that's not worthy to be there, they're gone. I wasn't fortunate enough to be a head coach, but I wouldn't have been concerned about that at all because I get to recruit the people on my team for the most part. And I know what I always recruit. So I recruit savages. And the best part about it is when you recruit them, the guys that ain't on their level, they leave because the other guys make them uncomfortable. And I tell everybody, you don't have to get rid of a lot of people in an organization most of the time when you're going through transformation leadership or your change management. You just change the culture enough that all of the average people understand that they probably need to look for a better job. And this ain't the environment that they're going to prosper in because we're not going to accept average work. And it's interesting. I just had this conversation with one of my mentees, senior level executive in athletics. And the individual, took over a department and was really unhappy with some of the people in the department. And I just said, hey, man, turn the heat up. And within 6 months, the two people that he wanted to replace turned in the resignations letter. One lady retired and the other one resigned and went and got a different job. And he told me, he was like, man, I said, dude, this is how it works. You just turn up the heat and everybody that don't like the heat gets out. Everybody else raises their level, gets better, does what they got to do. And pretty soon you got a high performing organization.
Now, speaking of turning up the heat, obviously, I mean, just like you had said before, you have different levels of skills, whether that be in athletics, in academics, or in the workplace, whatever the case is. Where do you draw the line? For example, you were involved with the SEALs, and obviously you were in the top 1%, not even 0.01% of the military. So how far is too far, if you know what I mean? I mean,
How
I guess,
how
how do you draw the line?
how far is too far for what?
I guess if you push someone from that leadership standpoint, for example, what you had just mentioned with your mentee.
So here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm not pushing people. I'm pushing the environment. The environment pushes people out. I'm not riding nobody. I don't deal with the bottom. You know, you hear that adage, you spend 80% of your time on the bottom 20% of your people, roughly. I don't spend any time with the low performers in my organizations ever. I only spend my time with the high performing individuals and the people that can impact the bottom line, i.e. the top 10%. Those are the people that I'm coaching. Those are the people that I'm leading. I expect them to lead everybody else below them, but the environment changes. I tell everybody, man, when I take over an organization, like the environment changes in about 3 days. And when that environment changes, I don't have to put pressure on anybody. The environment does it. And they come to work and they're not happy anymore. And they're not comfortable. And they get scared because actually there's accountability, right? And there's confrontations. Like, you know, my Bible on leadership is the 5 dysfunctions of a team, period. Like, it's the Bible. And 4 out of the 5, 99% of the time aren't being executed on teams. And so when you work out for all 5 of those and you light fire to the organization, I just call it gets hot, man. And people don't like that heat. But high performers, they love it. They want it to get hotter. So I don't want you to think that I'm running around like running people out of the organization. I don't do that at all. I just make the organization really, really hot. And if you don't like heat, then you decide, hey, I need to leave.
Okay. Yeah. So now I want to follow up with that. So a follow-up question, or what are some of the things that you do specifically to change the environment once you take over? I've read some stories, I've read some articles about the culture, because sometimes it takes a couple of years for the culture to change. So I'm curious as to what your, I guess, feelings are on environment and culture, and what are some of the things that are the same and what are the things that are different?
So here's what I'm going to say on it takes 2 years or 3 years to change the culture. It takes 2 or 3 years to change the culture if you're being nice to everybody's feelings. If you come in, so one of the first things I do is I evaluate leadership. The first thing I do, day one, I evaluate leadership. Those that aren't worthy on my scale get removed, okay? Because I can't have bad leaders. You can't have bad leaders in any organization. And so, and I'm different because I use a formula, this impact hiring deal that I have that I learned in the military, where basically it's a non-biased approach to hiring. It's the same non-biased approach for firing and promotions. Like, I look at you as an individual, what assets do you bring to the table? And a lot of times what you see in America is people get to positions through time. And I am the antichrist on people getting positions on time. People get positions in my organization based on capability, period. Okay. Capacity and capability are the only 2 ways that you're going to get promoted in my organization. Because a lot of times what happens is we hire or we try to promote the guy that's been there for 15 years and he sucks. And then you promote him and you're like, oh, I'm getting lackluster performance out of this division. I just don't understand why it's not going well. Well, you got a bad person in charge. So I tell everybody all the time, I got a huge barometer for finding superstars. I just see people differently than everybody else does. I got the ability to train people to see people like I see them, but a lot of times their biases and their unconscious kind of way they're used to doing things always overrides what they know is right. So I tell everybody, man, I don't have no problem empowering a 23-year-old, a 24-year-old to do some big things in the company, right? One of my superstars right now is getting ready to graduate from college, and I have a business that's getting ready to start up, and I was going to put her in charge of it. Now she got a little bit of cold feet, whatever. I'm not worried about it. We'll see how the cold feet react to when I give her an offer letter of 6 figures in her first job out of college. But I know what she's capable of, and I know how much capacity she has because I work with her here in Illinois. So, you know, that's the thing that I say. Like, if it takes you 2 years to change the culture, you're an awful leader.
I think that's pretty cool. It's definitely putting a new perspective on things. So now I kind of want to loop back around to what you had said about your barometer. What exactly are you looking for? What are the specific personality traits? What intangibles, or what are the specific things that people do? Is it a leadership style? I guess more so, what are you looking for? Or if you're looking at high school kids when they're coming in, when you recruit them, or if you're looking at a potential new hire.
So here's what I'm going to tell you. We could talk about impact hiring and all of the facets of it, but I'll just leave it at this. I got an article on LinkedIn that I'll send over to you. It's about a 3-hour workshop that you can do on your own. It'll explain everything to you. Now, the problem you're probably going to need an interpreter. However, there is 93% of communication is body language. So I tell everybody, and I'll give you a little bit of the cut of it. 200,000 years ago, you had to know what a bad person looked like. And you had to know from 200 yards away. And if you saw a bad person, you tried to open the distance and get away from them. If they were a good person, you might close the distance. Hang on real quick. Okay, what'd they say? Really?
Okay.
You got chicken pox, bud.
It's inside of me. I got a
He
sign
never
of me.
got his second shot.
All
So
right.
he said he should have some protection. And he's not sure, like, with having some protection, how it's gonna present. Like, it might not be as bad, or he doesn't know how long the course is going to be.
How do we miss his chicken pox? Is that the MMR?
They can give it in with the MMR, I think.
So we missed it because we were holding off on vaccinations.
Yeah.
All right, it'll be fun. We all lived through it. My son got chicken pox. You okay?
Yeah, I don't know how the world, like, you've been home for a week.
Oh boy.
I don't know.
All right, I'm gonna give him an oatmeal bath to help him do this.
Okay. So my son, so we're not big on vaccinations because my middle son got autism from the MMR shot. So my youngest son got the MMR shot a year ago, but I guess we missed his chicken pox. He got his first chicken pox vaccination, but didn't get his second one. And now my man got chicken pox. So, c'est la vie. He'll be fine. Okay, so you guys ready to go?
Yeah. So looping back to
I'm gonna finish it.
What was that?
I said I'm gonna finish it. I'm gonna finish the thought that I had when they came in. Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
so you had to, and every time you got closer, you made another evaluation until you were face to face. If you messed up that evaluation, you're now fighting for your life and you could get killed. So your ability to evaluate somebody from a long ways away with no communication is astronomical. But in the American culture, we want to have interviews for 45 minutes. Okay. I'm currently working with a company right now, and I'm teaching them my 3-minute interview process. And it's causing all these fireworks. But what it's doing is we've interviewed over 200 people in the last month. And they're like, Jake, we couldn't have talked to 200 people in the next 2 years. So what we're doing is I'm doing a ton of evaluation on body language. I'm doing a little bit of evaluation on what they're saying. And I'm doing a lot of evaluation on trying to dig into what they've already told us to see if they're full of crap. Because 90% of the people interviewing these days have fabricated their resume for the job And so I'm trying to get through to, I want to get 5 layers deep in whatever they've told me. And if they can't get 5 layers deep, I know 2 things. They don't have the capacity to memorize, to have a memory of the past. And 2, they're probably BSing me, and so we're good. So in 3 minutes, I can get a 95% answer on what I got in front of me. Me personally, I only interview for 3 minutes. I don't never have a 45-minute interview ever. Now, the company I'm working with, they want to do follow-on interviews for 45 minutes and get the whole fit and all that other stuff. Great. They hired the 2 people that I said, they had 2 big jobs open, and they've hired both of the people that I said they would hire off of a 3-minute interview. So that's the difference, right? Like, and it's nothing, I didn't develop it, came straight out the military. So I just fine-tuned it for corporate America, and then I'm getting people to break biases, right? Because you can't argue with what you see in front of you if there's no communication. There's no interpretation of verbal communication, or I liked how they spoke, or they were well dressed. Nah, none of that. What did you see? So it really, it exposes all of the people that exhibit a lot of bias. It exposes the people that aren't capable of seeing talent. And so the other aspect of all of it is, I only allow my talented people that are good at evaluating talent hire people. If you're not good at it, I don't care who you are. And in my organizations, you're not going to rise in the ranks if you don't know how to hire superstars. And really what we're really trying to do is avoid hiring 6s and belows, period. Like, we are trying to avoid hiring anybody that's not willing that's not capable as an individual.
That's pretty cool. I definitely think that's something that I gotta try. I gotta practice on my own, doing that 3-minute podcast and seeing what happens. But now I am curious about the hiring, the promotion, the development. For example, athletes or employees, if they are on the cusp of getting promoted or stepping up in leadership or in a leadership role, what are some of the conversations that you need to have before you make that quote unquote jump?
So here's what I'm going to tell you. We are growing our superstars, our top performers, from the day I get into the organization. So our whole job as leaders is to grow the next level and the next generation of leaders, period. And I tell everybody, if somebody is capable enough to lead, then give them the opportunity. However, I always make sure that we set them up for success. Now, I'll tell you this, it might mean long hours. The manager might have to work on Saturdays. He might be forced to get the 23-year-old person up to speed so that she can give the presentation and not him. Okay. And that's the crux of it. Like, leadership development is in everything that I do at every level from day one, period. And it comes back to, I'm pulling out all of the 10s. So I know exactly who I'm working with, and I don't care how old they are. I don't care. Like, I tell everybody, like, our fighter pilots were like 20 years old that won World War II. You know, go look at your guy from Facebook. That dude was sitting in a dorm room at 19 and built an animal. Okay, so I don't care about the age quotient and the experience quotient when it comes to leadership. I care about capability and capacity, period.
Okay. So that's one of the conversations that I was actually having with leadership, even as a young or an older individual. I believe when I was a senior in college, we had one SEAL come in to do a presentation. I mean, this is a few years ago. And I met up with him afterwards, and I asked him, what are some of the things that we should consider? And one of the topics that came up was the decentralized, just being decentralized, essentially allowing freshmen or sophomores to lead if needed, not always having to be a captain who's a senior. So I'm curious, how do you implement that in college athletics specifically, like football, for example?
Can you hear that ringing?
I don't know.
So here's what I'm gonna say about decentralized leadership and all of that. I don't ever vote on captains. Matter of fact, I don't have captains. I
I'm
got
sorry, what was that?
leaders.
You don't have what?
I don't have captains. I have leaders, and then I have everybody else, period. And I probably got anywhere from 12 to 14 leaders on the football team. There'll normally be 1 or 2 guys that are in charge based on the capacity. The last 4 years I've been in Illinois, we had awful leadership. So there was 2 years ago when we went to a bowl game, we had solid leadership. And last year, we had 1 guy and he struggled. Okay. Leadership was not something that we focused on greatly at Illinois. So the results were in the pudding. Decentralized, like I'll give you this story. So in 2003, I was at the United States Naval Academy. I was bringing Omega Psi Phi, which is a Black fraternity, back to the Naval Academy after 20 years of absence. No, after 30 years of absence. So 81 to 03. And we had 7 people that were involved in the process. And I started with the chain of command. I started with the first guy, fired him. Second guy, fired him. Third guy, fired him. Fourth guy, fired him. Fifth guy, fired him. And I got to a sophomore. And I knew the kid was a superstar. I snatched him he was getting ready to transfer to Virginia Tech. And I saw him on the yard at the Naval Academy. I grabbed him by his shirt collar and we had a long conversation at my house the following Saturday. And I told him he wasn't going nowhere. He was too good. Okay. So we ended up with my guy, Corey Barksdale, and everything smoothed out. So when you put the right leaders in charge, everything smooths out. So we had a sophomore running 3 seniors, 2 juniors, and another sophomore, and he ran it like a champ. Fast forward from 2003 to 2021, and my man took command of a nuclear submarine last week. That's not by accident. That dude was a superstar. And that's what happens. So, for me in athletics, I don't really care. Now, athletics is one of those places where they got to be on the field, but they don't have to be your best athlete. They don't have to be. Most of the time, I tell everybody, your star athletes are very seldomly the leaders. They're selfish individuals. A lot of times they're not good for the team, and they have to be led. And so sometimes it's your role players. They got to play, but they don't have to play a lot. They got to play enough. The best leader we've had at Illinois over the last 2 years, 3 years has been our kicker. And Caleb is a rock star, but he hasn't been able to break onto the field yet. And the result is it's hard for the kicker to lead the football team. But he's phenomenally phenomenal. So absolutely decentralized leadership. You want everybody to solve problems at the lowest level. You want everybody to be able to provide value at the level they're at and push value up. But that all comes back to you got to pick the right people to be in charge.
Now I'm curious about the having leaders as opposed to captains. What are some of the scenarios where you're sort of monitoring the players, and where are some of the best places to look for their leadership to show or present itself?
So you're going to read this article that I sent you. It's the first thing we do when they report as freshmen. But remember, I'm a pro. So when we talk to them in recruiting, I put my 2 cents in on leadership. And my 2 cents is 99% right. I might miss 1 out of 100 guys, but the superstars are easy to see. Those are the easy ones. So, but we evaluate them, and you'll see it in the article that I sent over to you. Like, it's a physical evaluation, 3 stations, 15 minutes a pop. At the end of those 45 minutes, I'll know exactly what I have in a person. I'll know exactly what their capabilities and their limitations are. I'll know exactly what their leadership potential is. And it will not change. I tell people, like, I ran stations on 9th graders, 8th graders going into 9th grade 2 years ago. And there was 2 superstars that came out of those stations, and they are killing life right now, coming from impoverished homes and don't have anything. And the young lady that I love has a 4.0. So we evaluate it early, and then there's not a lot of ambiguity to what I do. Like, I know exactly what they look like. At Illinois, over the last couple of years, we've been stretching for leaders. So there's some guys that have been in the leadership council that I would never have in the leadership council. But a lot of that is because I wasn't in charge, right? I wasn't the head coach. So I have to do what the head coach wants to do, and, you know, be a good soldier and try to help as much as I can from my position.
Yeah, I like when you spoke about the transitioning part. Essentially, some of the things that I kind of struggle with in terms of recruiting specifically, we come and meet the athletes, we meet the players, but they're still in high school. So when we meet them, if we get a verbal commitment or whatever the case is, you still have a year in between from the time that you meet them to the time that they actually get to campus. Sometimes they actually do the work, they come in, they're ready to play, but some don't. So I'm curious as to what some of the tasks that you are trying to implement or assign the athletes before they arrive on campus.
So we don't have a lot of tasks that we assign to our guys because I just assume they won't do it. Prima donna football players aren't, other than lifting and running, but most of them don't do that either. So I get them, like, when they check in, I get them for a full week. I have them for 5 days, and I have a whole curriculum that we go through in that 5 days: time management, alarm clocks, not cell phones, right? I have a trouble prevention program that I run, which is case-based learning, quick 10-minute poppers. And we'll do 1 a day. We'll get the first 6 out of the way. And then after that, we'll do 1 or 2 a week till I get done with the first 15 of them. And then the team does one of those every month, which is just a reminder to stay out of trouble, basically, and ask yourself, is it worth it, right? I don't try to teach right or wrong, but I do try to teach you to ask the question, is it worth it, right? Like, is it worth me smoking this blunt and losing my scholarship? Probably not. So that I make good decisions. So, but all of that is up front. I don't expect them to do anything before they get here. The good ones always do, but that comes back to recruiting.
Okay, now I'm going back to your SEAL, your time as a SEAL. Obviously, you have a great structure. You have a great transitioning process for athletes. So I'm curious as to what it was like when you do your your check-ins for teammate. What was your transition like? Was there any leadership challenges when you first started out?
I wasn't in a leadership role for 2 years almost, and then I had a OIC, so I was the assistant officer in charge. I had maybe one of the worst officers in the history of the Navy in charge of me, so it was awful, right? And this dude had been fired 3 times in the Navy SEALs. He was just awful. He was a bad person. He was a liar. He was always trying to connive. He was always trying to manipulate the situation. He would blame everybody else for him failing. And, at the end of the day, he got me fired, which, whatever. I had been talking to my command structure for the last 9 months about how bad a dude this guy was. And then, I got fired, and then they put the golden boy of the command in his platoon. He tried to fire him, and then they ended up firing him, but not before I dropped my 187-page grievance about all the BS that I had to deal with, being the only Black officer on the East Coast for 3 years. So, I say this to say onboarding in the SEAL teams, like, I tell everybody, Buds is kindergarten and the SEAL teams are the NFL. So the learning curve that you have to experience just getting to the SEAL teams is epic. And I was fortunate enough that I got to do a workup with a platoon as the safety officer. And so I got to learn a bunch of stuff kind of with no stress, didn't have a gun in my hand, you know. I was there because I got there a week after the training block started. I ended up not going to SQT for like 6 months. So I spent 6 months in the woods on boats, just learning how to be a SEAL and all of that stuff. And really, like I tell people, man, you got to get acclimated to that environment because that environment is really, really scary. I liken, and I tell my young guys reporting to the SEAL teams now, I liken it to probably stepping into prison for the first time, right? Like that first 6 months of prison is a rough experience for you. And the SEAL teams is pretty much the same thing because you got the same type of individuals walking by you in the hallways. You got a bunch of killers, even more so now, but you just have a bunch of type A savages. And so it takes you some time to get acclimated with the environment and the individuals, and it's real because you went from kindergarten and buds to the NFL.
Yeah, it sounds like a fun time. But obviously you just mentioned, you said that you were the only Black officer on the East Coast. So nowadays, obviously race is a very hot button topic. So I'm curious as to what, I guess what those situations, what those scenarios, those issues are in regards to race and how that affected your abilities to lead. And if there were any situations that if you had to work around some of those things.
See, but I'm from Washington State. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but you're not going to call me the N-word and walk away. Like I'm not that dude. I'm not the quiet pacifist. I'm gonna put my hands on you and educate you in a different type of form of fashion. And that didn't necessarily work the best in the SEAL teams, right? Because what happens is you just have more people testing you. And I don't lose. Like I'm a college wrestler. I grew up fighting. Like I'm not gonna lose. So at the end of the day, you know, I'll just say it was a really, really hard experience on me. It was part of the reason I got out, right? It was a large part of the reason I got out, that and I wanted a family. But it just, I would say this, and it's the same culture now. We just work around it. I didn't have any mentorship. My biggest flaw personally in the SEAL teams was I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a guy to slap me across the face and say, hey man, you ain't handling this the right way. You're not doing this the right way. You need to look at it the right way, right? Because I mean, we've mentored 7 Black officers in the last 13 years. Every Black officer to graduate from training has been in our program, and we've been successful. And I had another dude at SEAL Team 8, or SEAL Team 2, I'm sorry, as a Black intel officer, and you know they were trying to get him, and he just didn't understand what was happening. And with my mentorship, he was able to take a couple wraps off and not let the water go off his back like a duck, right? I was more like a damn, you know, bounty tissue. They put water on me and I soaked it up and just got angry. So it was just, you know, I wish I could say it's changed, but it hasn't. It will change when we get enough diversity into the SEAL teams, enough heavy pipe hitters that are carrying their weight and doing a good job. But it's pretty much the same environment I was in there now.
Wow, it's definitely a challenge. Now I'm curious about the mentorship aspect of that. You had said that you didn't always have a mentor there. You didn't have anyone there to kind of guide you there. So I guess my next question is more so regarding people's roles, people's interpretation of what a role model is or what a mentor really is. So I'm curious as to how you go about finding a mentor or how you would advise the younger guys who would be as to who the right person to look up to would be. What are you looking for?
So in my sports organizations, every freshman that reports will have a junior or a senior. Someone on the leadership council will be their mentor. Notice I didn't say a senior or anybody. They will have a very specific mentor that relates to them. And normally what we do is we have a mixer, like the first or second day they're on campus. And because of recruiting visits and unofficial visits, most of our leaders already know who they want. But then we'll have a meeting and say, all right, who do you want? We'll have like a draft basically. And most of the time, like they pick great ones. So in any organization I'm running, that's an integral fabric of the organization. The leaders have to grow leadership, period. And it starts with onboarding your young people the right way and making them good. In the SEAL teams, it's a little bit different, right? Our guys understand that you got to have a mentor 5 years ahead of you, 10 years ahead of you, and 20 years ahead of you. And I ask them, I tell them, you got 4 months to give me your first 2 mentors, the 5 and the 10 year. I'll give you 6 months to find a 20 year. But after that, I'm gonna start hazing you if you don't have it. Because I know that's the only reason that I didn't like crush the SEAL teams and make it to 9/11 and get to cut my teeth in the glory, is because I didn't have a mentor to help me out of the dark times that everybody experiences. And really, I was just internalizing everything that was happening to me. And it really wasn't, what was happening to me as much as my reaction to what was happening to me that was causing more of it to get piled on my plate.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have that onboarding system. It's definitely cool, but that makes me think. So, for example, personally, I don't really have like a clear-cut mentor. I have different mentors for different parts of life, like old friends and stuff like that. But I'm curious, what exactly should I be looking for?
So what exactly do you do right now?
So right now, I work as an athletic developing coordinator. So I work with our deaf and hard of hearing athletes here in Rochester, New York.
Okay.
So obviously, I don't coach, but I'm more so of I'm academic advising, life advising, stuff like that.
So I would tell you then, all right, let's flip it around a different way. What are your life goals?
I wish I could give you a straight answer. I have a lot of different ideas, but I wouldn't say I haven't really locked down on one yet. I definitely, I would say something within the student athlete services.
Okay, so like you got to know where you want to go before anybody can help you get there. And then only way I pick a mentor is if they're sitting where I want to be, or they've sat where I want to go. Period. I don't take advice from friends, smart people. I don't take advice. The only person I'm taking advice from is somebody that has went where I want to go. Period. And has been successful where I want to go. I've been under a bunch of head coaches that stink. And I don't listen to them one bit. I don't listen to anything they say because I know they stink. Yeah, they're where I want to go. Wanted to be a head coach for the longest, but I can't listen to you if I know that you're not successful. And so that's the two factors we put on it, man. Have they sat where you want to go, and are they successful? Period. And the other kind of side one is, are they willing to help? Because there's a lot of people out there that have been successful that are really good, that are sitting where you want to be, that would never help you. If you were their son, they wouldn't help you. So that's the other aspect of it. You got to find a mentor that's willing to help, and they got to have those two other qualities.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I definitely am going to start looking a little bit harder and just for that and kind of looking for that in my field, people who are sitting where I want to go. So now I'm curious, for example, in SEAL team or in college athletics, how often do you have to encourage people to become self-starters in terms of mentoring, in terms of leadership? For example, you can't just tell an athlete like, hey, you're up, step up. So where do you essentially find the balance where an athlete is stepping up on their own, or where you have to kind of pull them in into stardom?
So in the SEAL teams, never. SEAL teams is the highest, it's the largest capable group I've ever worked with. Like you have rock stars all the way down to the lowest guy in the SEAL teams for the most part. Every now and then you'll get some guy that's just not very good, right? Like my OIC was in peacetime. They were trying to save him, so they gave him 4 chances to get fired. But those times are gone now. After 20 years of hard war, like there is, like if you're not capable, you won't last. You won't get through SEAL team. You won't get through buds if you're not capable in the SEAL team. Doesn't happen. So SEAL teams is out. On a team, that's your whole job. Your whole job as a development officer is to get them to be as successful as they can be. Now, I put a big precedence on it coming back to recruiting, but that's your whole job. Like that's everything in your job is to get them to do what you want them to do, to achieve as much as they can achieve. And you're always trying to get them to be better self-starters, right? At a program like Illinois that's been at the bottom of the Big Ten for the last 10 years, oh, absolutely. Your best players are some of your the guys that got to be the most motivated, which is why we didn't win a lot of games here.
Speaking of motivation, I wanted to ask you a question that I had asked one of the other guests that I had on the podcast. I just wanted to see what your take was. Obviously, in athletics, you see 2 different groups of people. For example, you have the superstar athletes, people who are physical freaks, people that can do all of the above, but they're not necessarily in it, if you will. But then you have the other group of people who might not necessarily have the same physical abilities or have the same level of skills, but they have all of the other intangibles. So how do you handle both of those groups of people?
So here's what I'm going to say. In the Big Ten, they better all be physically capable. Okay. And then I'm going to say this in the Big Ten, they better all be, right, mentally capable. Okay. Now, the superstar athletes, I handle everybody the same. I don't change my course of action. I don't, like, all of my guys got 3 goals, short-term, midterm, long-term goal on their boards. I don't, there's no different treatment for anybody in my organizations. Like I told you before, I run a meritocracy. So, if the star athlete ain't doing what he's supposed to do, he's going to get hammered, just like the JV walk-on kid is going to get hammered, right? It's that standard. It's the environment that I talk about that gets everybody to understand people don't get preferential treatment, right? Like you're not gonna, like, you're the star athlete. I'm not handling your case differently than I'm handling the walk-on's case. Everybody's gonna get treated the same. Okay. Now, I've had some people tell me that, oh, they're the starter, Jake, we don't want to do that. They lost a lot of games. Okay. They lost a lot of games. Me, on the other hand, I run a meritocracy. Everybody treated the same. I'll tell y'all this story. So in the SEAL teams, we were going to Blackwater for CQB, which is like, I live between the SEAL teams and Blackwater. So it's like 58 miles from the SEAL teams to Blackwater and Virginia Beach. And because I lived halfway, I was just like, look, I'll drive myself there instead of driving to Virginia Beach and then driving back to North Carolina. So I left and I had an hour and a half to drive 25 minutes. And for an hour, I could not find this dirt road that was right across the border, 50 feet past the 7-Eleven, couldn't find it. So I showed up late to the first day of training, about 20 minutes. I was about 5 minutes late. So I showed up, training started at 8. I showed up at 8:05. I was late for the safety brief. And my OIC, the bad guy, was being a complete douche about it, right? And so I was just like, look, I'll take care of it. I will take care of it. I know I'm late. I know I messed up. I will take care of it. And so immediately, as soon as we walked outside, I pulled everybody up. I said, hey, listen, I'm the AOIC. I was late. I was in North Carolina at 7 o'clock. I couldn't find a driveway. It's completely my fault. I will be here 2 hours early every day for the next week. And everybody was like, oh, man. And then one of the dudes was like, don't you think that's a little bit harsh? I said, no, what happened today was unacceptable. So I will punish myself and I will be here 2 hours early. So every day I would drive down there. I would get there about 5:45 and I would climb in the back seat of my car and go to sleep from 5:45 to about 7:45. Okay. And every day when those dudes showed up, my car was parked out there and I would climb out. They didn't care that I was sleeping in the back seat. They knew I got there early enough. And literally it set the tone for us because I mean, ain't nobody perfect, but you got to hold yourself accountable just like you want to hold everybody else accountable. And that's the thing a lot of people don't do. They're not willing to apply the same rules to themselves as they apply to everybody else.
That's awesome. I think that's a great way to wrap up the interview. I think it's really cool being able to see your work continue spreading to more superstars coming up and all of that. So I'm curious as to where people can find you online.
Oh, it's easy, man. If you just Google my name, I'm going to come up on YouTube. My email is going to come up. My phone number is going to come up. We're doing a bunch of awesome stuff with aviation right now. So we got a bunch of pilots. It's crazy. Like I've been attracting so much talent lately. It's amazing, man. I got an African American with a 518 MCAT, and I got a Hispanic male with a 520. They represent the two top minority African Americans and Hispanics on the MCAT test. There's 3 African Americans with a 518 or higher, and he's got to be the only Hispanic dude with a 520. So, like, I'm collecting doctors and PAs right now. We're focusing heavily. I'm doing this pilot stuff. Special forces is always in play. Like, I always got a toe in that. But I'm easy to find, man. You can find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram. I'm very accessible. I return all my emails. Only thing I'll tell you, if I don't spell it right, that's tough because I can't spell very well.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate you joining us. And I wish you the best of luck with your new business, your new organization, and your future endeavors.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much.